Welcome back to day 2 of this parking area and driveway renovation. So the first job was to scrape all of the loose gravel off the driveway, starting out at the street, working back into the property. The client was really unhappy with how the rain ran down the driveway and eroded off all of that material, carried it down, blocked up the drains and actually caused flooding in the downstairs of their house at one point. So it was really important to them that the new surface on the driveway was stable and didn't erode when it rained. So my first task was just to go through and scrape out all the loose material and get rid of that so we had a good foundation to work from. Also, this driveway had a bit of a positive camber on it, so it was taller in the middle, and I really wanted to knock that top off so that we could flatten the driveway completely. That would mean that the water would get off to the downhill side, which is the left side in this video, more quickly. It would get down into the brick gutter and then get carried away to the drain, rather than the water running off to each side, and then the water on the right, when it got down to the bottom of the hill, then it would have to cross over the driveway again. It was very hard to keep the drain that was under the driveway clear and running, so I thought it was a better idea to flatten the surface completely and then let the water naturally work its way off to the downhill side. Clear it from the surface just as quickly as you could. I ended up pulling, I would think, about 8 ton of material off the top of the driveway. It's really quite surprising how much material is required just for a thin scrape. The customer was fighting a continuous battle with all of this loose material just running off down the drive and blocking up their drains. The nice thing is that this gravel was perfect for the foundation for the new parking area, and reusing it this way basically saved us the trouble of having to trouble and expense of having to bring in road base to build up the foundation of the parking area. So it wasn't any loss doing this. Pretty dry there when I was doing this project, and very dusty, as you can see. It's a bit of a windy day too, so the dust was getting carried around. Once again, the mud bucket is quite good for this kind of work. You want the straight edge, and it can move a fair amount of material very quickly. Just have to clear out the corners. I ended up doing them by hand. Sometimes you've just got to get off the machine and use a shovel. So the next step, once the surface was scraped, was to rip the driveway surface. Now there's a bunch of erosion and uneven areas up the front here, so the first job was to rip all of that and flatten it out in preparation for the new surface to go down on top. And the point of ripping the surface is to break it up and create some tooth there for the new surface material to bind into when you compact it with the roller. If it's just a flat, nicely smooth, scraped surface, the new material won't bind to it properly, and then you're in trouble because it'll peel off like it was paint or something when it starts to get some wear on it. So the first step is to scratch that surface up, create some tooth that the new material can lock into. I'm just using a trenching bucket here, and even though it's quite narrow, well, the teeth are nice and close together, so that means the surface gets nicely ripped. Whereas my general purpose digging bucket, it's significantly wider, it's like twice the width almost, but it only has 3 teeth still. So having talked to the client, we decided to extend the new parking area surface all the way to the picket fence at the back. So I had to move all of the rubbish that I'd pulled out. We put that aside for later disposal. And then I continued working through, just clearing off the green material and scraping the gravel that was on the old parking area there, the informal one, scraping that off and placing it in the foundation of the parking area. So nothing goes to waste if we can possibly help it. That gravel there was all quite usable material. You pick out most of the green stuff and then take it back to the clay. And spread all of that over. Now we trim up the back edge, more tree roots. Take off another skim. Get it nice and neat. I'm just taking that clay that I'm pulling out there, moving it back to the spoil pile so that it can be spread back on the lawn. Try to keep the clay separated from the gravel. Wouldn't hurt having a bit of clay in the gravel in the foundation. The clay will just help everything bind up, but the gravel already had plenty of fines in it. So putting that trenching bucket back on because I had more roots to deal with. And those big ones in particular had to come out. So the trenching bucket has some really good teeth on it. It did a good job just grabbing the ends of the timber and ripping it apart. So now I'm up to spreading that gravel, and it was really dry because it was loose material on the surface of the driveway. There was just no moisture in it. So here I'm putting some water on and then running back and forth with the machine, spreading that water around, mixing it in, getting the gravel reasonably wet. It's always a tricky thing adding water. You don't want to make the material too wet that it turns into mud or soup, but if it's too dry then it won't bind up properly when you compact it. So here I am just going back and forth, mixing. You've got to keep working at it, get the lumps out. There's about enough water in there. Now I'm just spreading it out, getting a good layer across the whole of the parking area, blending it into the old parking area, existing parking area. I always love this stage of a job where you're starting to see the finished surface coming together. Now I'm just running backwards and forwards with the tracks, compacting that material. It won't get it fully compacted, but it does a pretty good job. The tracks, especially when they're relatively new and they've got good cleats on them, they work a lot like a sheep's foot roller, and they really pack material down. They're especially good on clay, but they worked well on this too. So now it's time to get the new driveway surface down. What I'm spreading here is a crushed brown granite from the local material supplier. It's nice stuff. Colour was not quite what we wanted, but that wasn't a problem in the end. I was looking for something that was similar to the original driveway material, which was a collection of crushed concrete, crushed brick, some quartz, some granite, all sorts of things. It was really eclectic, so it was nice. It had lots of different colours in it. So this stuff wasn't that similar, but I talked with the client about it. They decided that this was the best bet out of all of the available options. This material was about $98 a tonne, I think, or maybe $90 a tonne. Once again, sometimes you've just got to get off and use a hand tool. You can dicker around with the machine all you like, but there are occasions where a rake is the quickest solution. Now this is the next step with this. We wanted the surface to be stabilized so that it wouldn't be eroded by the rain. And the solution for that was to mix lime with the gravel. Now, I'm only using one bag for a few meters there, but there's only maybe 30 mils of thickness of gravel, so there's not a lot of material. I probably could have gone heavier on the lime, but at the end of the day, I think what I used was enough. It seems to have done the job pretty well. So I was learning a little bit. Normally, if I'm mixing lime like this, I'll use a rotary hoe on my skid steer to do the mixing. But because of the size of the job and not having the skid steer there, I just decided to do it with the excavator. More lime. I figured out that the rake was the quickest way to spread that material, and then come back and hit it with the excavator to mix it in. My problem here was that, of course, the blade tends to push the material outward. So then I'm pulling it back in with the rake. I could have done it with the excavator, and I did later, but I was quite concerned about not accidentally damaging the brickwork along the edge of the drive once again. So I wanted to just be extra careful there. And it's like, okay, I'll do it by hand. But later on I did figure out how to do it without so much risk. So the trick was what I was doing here was just using the bucket to gently pull that material back in from the side. I needed a bit more material down the end, so I had to pull a bit back. I'm just using the screed here to give myself a completely flat surface from one side to the other of the driveway. So I didn't want any camber on it, I just wanted it to be a flat surface that would shed water as fast as possible to the downhill side. Surprisingly, this didn't turn out to be too hard on my back, which was my main concern while I was doing it. I had the lime spreading down pat by this stage. The other advantage of using lime here was that it lightened the material up, so it matched the house and the roof much better. I'm basically creating a very light lime render for the driveway surface. I tend to use lime for this sort of thing rather than concrete, which some people will use, because the lime gives you a more flexible result. The material's not as rigid as if it was concrete. So therefore it's more durable ultimately. Screeds are great for taking little lumps and bumps off and getting the surface consistent, but they're really not great for moving any significant amounts of material. And I haven't done any screeding like this in a long time, so I'd kind of forgotten the rules. I figured it out though and ended up doing it the right way before the end of the job. Keep getting my boots and my gloves full of gravel doing that. Running back and forth, packing that material in, making sure that I had enough there that it wasn't sitting down below the lip of the brickwork on the edges. Something very oddly satisfying about spreading lime. Now this is where I figured out the right way to mix the lime, and that is just to work backwards, pulling the gravel and the lime into a pile in the middle, getting it away from the edges, and then that makes it much easier to mix. So you just keep repeating that. Blade it forward, that mixes it, then you pull in the edges again with the bucket on the excavator. You can see it mixes up quite quickly and evenly. Again, packing that back in with the machine. Clean the edge up with the rake. And then get back on the screed and level it off. This is a fairly long stretch here. I did it all in one pass this time. Drop the lime on. I didn't actually put enough lime on to begin with. I should have realized it because the material here was actually somewhat thicker on the ground. It was more like 6 or 7 centimeters. And I really needed to put some more lime on this than I did in the first instance. Mixing. You can see that the color of the mixed material is a bit darker. It's not as pale as earlier down the driveway. And eventually I noticed that and thought, oh right, I need to do something about it. Yeah, you can clearly see that it's too dark there. This technique of driving along, pulling the bucket was good, but got to be really careful not to rip up bricks that way. You've seen some guys in orange shirts coming in and out. There were some tree surgeons working down the back of the property. So I was having to be a bit careful working around them. Keep an eye out for them. Found a little pocket of lime off to the side there that hadn't been incorporated properly. I think it was about now I started to realise that it really needed some more lime on. Yeah, there we go. I think it was only one more bag I put on. Probably could have tolerated 2, but the colour worked out okay, so I think I had the mix right. Had to be careful not to scrape too deeply when I was doing this mixing, because as soon as I got to the bottom of the new gravel, I'd start pulling up rocks out of the subsurface. And that was problematic because if they were big enough, then the gravel mightn't actually cover them. It turned out not to be an issue in the end, but I did have to pull out a fair few rocks. I'm just pulling the screed back along the top of the brickwork here. Finding that I've got more than enough material. So I was ending up dragging a fair bit of it, which was not ideal. It's not the best way to do that job. Even the rake is better for moving material around than doing it with the screed. I had a bit of a hump in the middle and generally not enough material down on the sides, so what I'm doing there is raking that excess out of the center of the driveway and now pushing a bunch of it back with the machine because I really did have more than I needed. And then tracking it in, packing it down so that I had a better idea of whether the finished material was at the right level or not. That screeding was hard work. Here we go, I've picked up another high spot, too much material, so I'm going to rake it off. And back on the screed. You can see how quickly that material was building up. Still picking up a lot of material there. I really did have more than I needed at that point. And eventually I'm going to give up and do it with the machine instead. Here we go, pushing off that excess. You can see just how much material I was picking up with the bucket there. It's way too hard to pull with the screed. I did end up taking out a bit too much, but that's fine. I can just toss a little bit back in with the shovel and then keep working. Find where the low spots are, fill them up. Getting very close to the end here. As it turned out, I think I had exactly enough material to get me up to the side of the road. Worked out really well. I thought for a while there I was going to have to get a bit more gravel just to finish off that last bit, which would have been very frustrating. So this is the last stretch out to the road. Spreading that gravel out, backblading it, packing it in. And then one last run with the screed. Another advantage of using a screed like this is that it lets you work all of the marks that the machine leaves out of the surface. And that's really important because when you come back and hit that with a plate compactor or a roller, if you have these tread marks from the machine in the surface, they'll be preserved in there. You'll still be able to see them, even if it's only kind of ghostly. So raking over the surface here. And next step is to put some water down, activate that lime. Plus it'll help the gravel to bind up. It's always tricky when you're doing this, figuring out exactly how much water is enough without being too much. because if you make the material sticky, then when you hit it with the compactor, the surface can bind to the plate, to the steel, and it can rip it off, actually pull up chunks of it. So you're trying to get it wet, but not too wet. It's actually a pretty delicate balance to try to achieve. I think I did okay with it here. I did have a couple of spots a little bit further up that were a little bit problematic, and did delaminate a little bit, but most of it was fine, and I just backfilled and recompacted those areas that had a problem. Really is a very beautiful property, this place. I love the hedges and the agapanthus, they just look great. That's it. Got the whole surface watered in. Now I'll come back, give it one more work over with the screed to take out all of those machine track marks, as you can see. Do the final leveling job. Get it nice and flat. And now it's time for the roller. I do like this old machine. It's very old. It's 40 years old. I think it's in 1984. But still runs, hits hard. So that's it for day 2. That was a full day's work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.